LinkedIn News.
What were you drawn to as a child?
Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, this is In the Arena, a podcast exploring human potential. I'm Leah Smart, and every week you'll find me right here in conversation with bright minds and brave hearts, learning how we can improve our lives and our world by transforming ourselves. So a few years ago, I was recommended this book called Wintering by Katherine May. And I can't remember who told me about it, but they did so because I was trying to understand how we each weather storms, metaphorically speaking. And after some avoidance of the book, I finally got around to reading it, and I loved it. So I highly suggest you grab it, especially if you're experiencing a tough time. But even if you're not, it's full of tools that can help you when you do. I got the chance to bring Katherine onto the show last year to talk about Wintering, and she was in the middle of releasing a new book, which feels like a companion to Wintering, called Enchantment, Awakening Wonder in Anxious Times. This one's about rediscovering your footing after you've wintered, or just rediscovering your footing in general. I like to think of it as a way to get tethered, but not in a trapped way, in a grounding and clear way. In our conversation, Katherine has a ton to say about being more intentional with our time, becoming better community members, awakening our sense of awe, and practicing the art of living with more enchantment. I just love this woman, so enjoy. Here we go.
Wintering is a book about the fallow periods of life. So I use the metaphor of winter to think about how ordinary it actually is for every person, not just unlucky people, to have a time in life when they feel like they've been frozen, when they can no longer take part in everyday life. They might be suffering in some way. It feels like we'll never get back on top again. And so I used winter to think about that time, because actually, if you look at the way that nature endures winter, it's in these cycles of sometimes withdrawing and sometimes cutting back to the barest bones. When you look closely at those things, they are the site where all life springs from. And they're also a place where we reflect and change and grow. I wanted to create a way to talk about those moments and to think about not like how we can make them better or how we can make them go quicker, because that's just not how any of it works, but to understand how crucial they are to our functioning. So fast forward to Enchantment, which is definitely the successor to Wintering. And that's a book about how we re-find ourselves again, perhaps after one of those very difficult periods. And I wanted to think about how we could dig into our softer emotions, our pleasure, our joy, our sense of awe and wonder and fascination, and how we could reignite those things to help to solve what I see as one of the big problems of our age, which is this sense of intense disconnection from the world around us. This feeling that something has happened, something has changed that leaves us feeling like we don't understand this world anymore, and that it's actually become a frightening place, a place that we don't feel at home. And one of the answers, the only answer we've had to that so far, is to keep fighting and arguing and yelling at each other. And I actually think that we need to start talking about how we nourish and nurture ourselves within those times and take great care of us so that we can go back out and change all over again, and to help to influence it in a positive way. But we have to be intact within that. And so that's where Enchantment came from.
You mentioned that the artifact right now, the unexpected artifact from being in lockdown and the experience of COVID, is this burnout. And it made me wonder, do you think that the reason is because we didn't winter? Is it time to winter, or is it time for enchantment? I'm trying to figure out where we are. Yeah.
I think the truth is that this is an unprecedented time for loads of us, and that actually for a lot of us, we've bounced from one winter to another. I think the lockdowns were very wintry for loads of us in many different ways, though, so they might have been because we felt isolated or lonely, or it might be because we felt like we didn't have any personal space. But equally, it could have been that we were the ones that were making everything run okay while other people were sick. I'm thinking about the people in the emergency services, for example, who worked and worked and worked during that time. And the problem with a time like that is that it's not as if humans haven't endured it before, but we've never endured it in an age when we can really talk about the effects. And what we're seeing now is something that was maybe hidden after previous big mass winterings, like the Second World War might be a good example, that there was this huge impact on mental and physical health after the event, but it tended to be concealed within families. And we don't do that anymore. And that's a really healthy artifact of our age. We now talk about it and we now show it. We go onto social media and we say, I'm not feeling it today. I'm not feeling it this week. I'm not feeling it this year. And it's another really important moment. I feel like for me, the big changes are happening now. I was surviving during that period and figuring out a way through and constantly improvising and worrying a lot. And now it feels like everything's come into roost a little. And there are definitely changes that I'm being invited to make by the world. I'm seeing friends around me who are just straightforwardly exhausted. There's no other way to say that. They're just so deeply tired after a long time of coping that their bodies are saying, absolutely not. You're not pushing me through this anymore. It's been a big time.
Yeah. When you mentioned World War II, I was like, God, it is in some ways like we have been through something that has globally affected all of us in a way that we're being forced to now step back. I almost feel like we're in between these two places, right? Like when I first read Wintering, I imagined I wouldn't need it again until I was in the midst of a really difficult time. But when you said there are changes I'm being invited to make by the world, I was like, ooh, yeah, I'm definitely in that place right now. You know, it's like I came out of winter and I was like dancing around and then it was 18 other things happened and my life has changed again in a few different ways. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you re-find your footing? And is that for you what Enchantment's about, is how to re-find your footing?
Yeah, how to refine your footing in a way that will help you when the next dip comes. In full acknowledgement that we're never going to solve this forever. It might not be a pandemic. Let's hope it's not a pandemic, but there will come another point of intense change or of exhaustion or of illness or of crisis. Whatever that is, it will come round again. And so how do we create a mental and emotional and spiritual toolkit that allows us to enter into those times more gently and more openly and in a way that doesn't take us down so hard and lets us see them coming a little bit better?
What caused you to use the elements as your sections in the book?
That came late in the process. I was doing an edit and I was looking for a way to structure the book. And as I was taking an overview, it just jumped out at me that everything I was talking about was really elemental. That was the intelligence behind all of this, almost, that when we try and reconnect with like the pulse of the world around us, what we're actually doing is connecting with those very classical ideas of water, earth, fire, and air. I found it really helpful to think about grounding in terms of earth and about how I needed to almost feel the weight of gravity weighing me down again, to feel like I was anchored again. And for water to help me to think about flow and fluidity and how we can soothe ourselves with that, but also how we can feel the power, the intensity of water and what it represents. And when it came to fire, that was something I really needed to talk about. You know, this idea of fire as something that, yes, is destructive, but there are necessary destructions in our lives. There are things that we need to destroy. And there are things that we need to burn through sometimes in order to find clarity. And then I came to air, which seemed to me so much about letting go and releasing and letting things disperse. And once I had that idea, I realized I'd written about those elements already, but they were just present. It was this real aha moment, like, oh, that's what I was saying.
Correct. For people who are not necessarily going to end up reading the book, but are wanting practices, what are the ways we can apply what you've talked about in the elements as we awaken wonder?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I talk about a lot in Enchantment is this sense of returning to a very childlike sense of connection. And I don't romanticize my childhood. I'm not one of these people that thinks that it was all very perfect back then and everything's terrible now. But what I do notice is that I very easily made those very deep connections with simple things when I was a child. I found it easy to sink deep into my attention and to engage with things that might seem trivial now. I'd spend hours, I used to collect rocks. And I spent hours like holding my collection and rearranging it and just thinking about what that rock meant, like how old it was, like how slow the process was to form it. So one of the ways I think that we can get back to that sense of enchantment is to remember what we were drawn to as children. And that opens up such a simple pathway. So for me, I was always running towards the water, and I still am. And I always wanted to hold a stone. And I want to do those things now. And actually, they are quite often the answer when I'm feeling stressed and burned out, is to return to those very elemental experiences.
So I've always loved water, but I didn't grow up around easy access to water, is the Bay Area. We certainly have our bridges and you have the ocean, but it's not like you're at the ocean every day, which a lot of people assume for Californians. Northern Californians, most of us are not at the ocean every day.
You're not surfing all the time. That's really
no,
disappointing,
we're not. It's
honestly.
cold. It's cold in like half the year and the water's freezing. Although some people do. I was drawn to animals. So I was kind of sitting here going like, you said you collected rocks. I collected like roly-polies when I was little. And then I had like hamsters, geckos, and I was fascinated by animals. So I was going, is that Earth?
I think in lots of ways, animals can represent all different kinds of elements depending on the animal. We have a bearded dragon upstairs that's my son's, and that's a very earthy experience. He has to bathe under light all the time to keep warm, and you pick him up and you really feel the way that the ground has radiated up towards him. It's really beautiful. Whereas, I don't know, if you had fish, I guess that would be a very different thing, wouldn't it? That connection to animals is so profound. For those of us that love animals, and I'm one of those people, like I can't imagine living without animals. It's such an important part of how I soothe myself and come back into myself. That connection is such a lovely thing.
Mm-hmm. It like turns your brain off. I mean, even just for the simplicity of like having a cat or a dog, being able to pet it or to look at a bearded dragon. What I loved about what you were saying is that you found that what you were drawn to as a child is often the answer or maybe like the antidote to the anxiousness and the burnout that a lot of us feel.
Yeah, it's almost like you're drawn towards your own medicine. We've got very distant from our own healing. We put that into the hands of someone else now, and we don't expect to understand it. But there are much more basic yearnings that I think we feel that are really oriented towards our own healing. But I think we often reject those gut instincts. We've learnt to do that as we've aged and grown, and we've learnt to believe that somebody else has the answer to that. I think we need both. We need that very natural elemental healing, and we need doctors too. Like, both can be true. It's not about saying that all of the wonderful scientific modern advancements are no good. Like, they're brilliant. But we also need to get something back that we've given away in our flight towards them. And that urge towards our own soothing, our own consolation is something that we can grow again within us.
How do we do that? I really resonate with what you're saying. We've given our own healing away, and we are actually drawn to our own medicine. There's so much we ignore or choose not to maybe learn about ourselves that can give us some of the medicine we're looking for.
The thing I'd say first of all is to not expect it to come right away. It's not a switch that we can flick anymore, because it's become very distant for a lot of us. And I think you have to train it back into yourself. We have deliberately advised not to listen to our gut instinct and to our intuition. And that can be a site of great trauma, actually. We've been told to override those strong signals from our body to say, this is not the right thing, this is not healthy, this is not safe for me. And when we've switched it off to that extent, it's going to take some work to get it back. And the question is whether we're willing to commit to that work. There's no shortcut to it. But you start by following those really subtle little breadcrumb trails. And looking, one of the reasons I talk about looking back to childhood such a lot is because that is one of those breadcrumb trails that we all have, like going back to those fascinations. And when you do that, you start to notice new ones too. You start to notice new attractions and new things you're drawn to. And that can create these wonderful new relationships. But you have to then give yourself permission to follow them. And every now and then you hit this voice that says to you, that's not something you do. You don't wear that colour. You don't go to those places. You don't know enough about this. And so the question for me is then, okay, how do I learn? How do I learn? How do I make this important? How do I draw this in because I'm feeling the need towards it?
Mm-hmm. I love the metaphor of coaxing. And I think one of the powerful things for people who might be listening and they're experiencing burnout, or they're in the midst of a big transition, or they're at a choice point, or they're starting to ask questions, but they're not sure how to even begin to find the answers. And I think that's where a lot of us give up, is like, well, I don't even know where to begin. So I may as well not begin at all, and I'll just continue. Yeah. I think what you're offering is, how do we just track down the breadcrumbs that will lead us back to ourselves?
Yeah, and I think one of the problems is that there will always be voices shouting a lot louder, saying, I know a really simple solution. It's 10 easy steps. Here you go. Follow this. And I know throughout my life, I've followed those over and over again. And I've always felt like I've failed. And I've always felt like I'm not good enough because they haven't worked for me. There's nothing simple about this life. And although we're beguiled by the idea that it could be simple, we can't solve it. We can't solve life. If it were that simple, everything would be fine. And so my message is always really complex. And I think people come to me after they've tried everything else. It's really hard, and it's slow, and it's a practice. It's not something you can learn once and for all and then never drop it again. You're going to drop it, but all of it's worth it, because all of it is the journey, and you are the journey.
Yeah, it's really enticing. And like, sometimes I have to write things that are like quick, easy, like, here's what I'm trying to share. And I do always hope that people don't look at that and go, oh, so that's how you do it. Like, I'm still figuring it out. I'm over here reading Wintering, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, I cry at night too. So like, don't think that, you know, or like, I wake up anxious too. Like, don't think that if you do these 3 things, nothing is going to ever go wrong again. It's
here's 3 tiny suggestions that might help a bit.
Correct. There is a huge toolkit that you're going to have to fill up, and you're going to have to not just fill it up, but keep doing things. And all I'm doing is giving you something to put in the toolkit, but by no means is it like going to take up more than an inch of space in a pouch.
And let's hear that multiplicity, and every little thing gives us a little extra step, but we've got to lower our expectations. It's honestly breaking us a little bit, I think, to have these huge expectations of what we can do. It's not realistic, and it's not what life actually looks like. And I think a lot of us are dogged by this horrible sense of failure that comes from nothing more than our own completely grand expectations that can't ever, ever, ever be fulfilled.
You know, I was reading an article, but it was about expectations, where they'd done a study on people who had expectations and found that the higher the expectations, the higher the disappointment. Not shocking, but, you know, you fall from a higher cliff as you keep on climbing.
Sure.
And for someone like me, who does have high expectations for myself, and who's always been sort of this like more of an overachiever, wanting things to all happen, wanting to do it all well, I struggled with the idea of like, well, where's the happy medium? Because I want to have expectations. You know, it felt like almost like not having expectations was giving up or complacency. And so like, where do you find that happy medium as we're trying to navigate this contentment?
One of the problems behind that is our individualism, honestly. Like, we don't spend enough time in community So we don't see ourselves in context. And I think the more time we can spend with other people and understanding what actual lives look like rather than Instagram lives or, like those big internet lives that look so impressive, I think that helps. But there's also a little exercise that I impose on myself every now and then when the yearnings get really big, like when I have all of these things I really, really want to do. And I ask myself every day, what will I regret not having done at the end of the day? And I find that puts a load of things into context, because quite often those things are the same every day. I would regret it if I didn't take a walk today. I'd regret it if I didn't spend time with my son. I would regret it if I didn't write a little bit towards my next book. Like, those are the things that are vitally important to me. And the rest of it, I'd be okay with if I didn't get done. So I try and keep recontextualizing what I actually am aiming at, because it can't be everything.
We'll be right back. We're taking a quick break. And we're back with the always lovely Katherine May. Talk to me about community, because one of my recent conversations was with someone who studies intimacy between friends, then also loneliness. I feel like so many of us are lonely, but I want to talk about what we do differently. As I look at a book like Wintering and think about Enchantment and kind of the work you're doing, a lot of times I think of this work as it must be done internally. I must be by myself. I must cocoon. I must disappear. And you're saying the opposite is true.
Well, I think there's a balance between the two. And I think that a lot of the things we talk about now is on the individual scale. And that's because, and I include myself in this, I am inexperienced in being a true community member. And all of my training has been about me as a single entity and what I do to the world. And I was trying to dig into this in Enchantment, and I don't have this set of ready-made answers about it, but I was thinking a lot about congregations and what congregations can mean to us. Like when we gather in a group with shared intent for a very certain time each week, one of the things that happens is that we are held to account. We're not only going to hear a positive view of our actions, we're not going to hear a one-sided, you're a superstar, keep going, it's brilliant, conquer the world, which is what Facebook will tell us if we let it. Like, that's what we'll hear back over and over again. Everything you do is okay, keep pushing, keep striving, everyone else is wrong, you're right. Like, that's the message we hear. And when we're in congregation, we hear something much more complex than that, which is, you're not perfect, but we love and accept you anyway. And we all need to learn, again, myself totally included in this, to seek out communities that offer us that much more complicated understanding of ourselves and our duties and responsibilities balanced with our individual striving and achievements, rather than to keep tending towards this very oversimplified diet of rah, 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 off you go.
Push, push, push.
Yeah. And that's hard, right? That's walking away from the thing that makes everything sound easy. Except what we know is it doesn't turn out to be easy. That actually only thinking about ourselves and only thinking about how we can justify everything we do is ultimately exhausting, and it makes us very lonely and it makes us feel very empty. We need to let back in the balancing, the counterbalancing for each of those values. How do we start to remake those circumstances in which we can have that very complex presence again, and where therefore we can bring our whole selves, we can just come as our true humanity? That's a big question for me in my life right now.
Yeah, it makes me think about, I grew up as a kid going to church almost every Sunday until sports took over our life.
Right.
And church was a natural part of my life. And I was actually just talking to a group of friends over the weekend. We all grew up in different religions. One was Jewish. I grew up Baptist. The other grew up Presbyterian, the other Catholic. And we were talking about the fact that there is like a really positive tethering that comes from having an experience with a group of people who are congregating around a common goal, but also a common belief about how we live in the world. And of course, this is such a complex conversation, right? I'm by no means saying like everybody should be religious or there's a certain, none of that. I'm just saying that we are a very hyper individualistic society. And I think that sort of gets tossed on us. I try to take in all the information that I can. I know that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And
Always.
so I look at this as like what we've lost when it comes to congregation, what we've gained when it comes to being individualistic and authentic and all these things we talk about. What are we giving up in that?
I think to make it a bit more intersectional as well, different people are affected by this differently, because one of the ways that our congregations used to function was on the work of women quite often. And then that very patriarchal authority was really violent towards an awful lot of people in loads of different ways. And there's no shame in the fact that loads of people have walked away from some very unhealthy congregations, but some really healthy ones are still thriving. I mean, that's why I love in my work to like not always answer the questions.
Right.
I love to ask the questions. I think that's a really necessary part of the work. And I don't yet have the answer. I mean, I point everyone towards Priya Parker's work on gathering. I think she's really brilliant at beginning to reformulate how we come together. But I don't think we know this one yet. But I do think the beginning of it is finding that urge towards resting in community rather than alone again, or having that as part of our spectrum of opportunity.
Which is why I say when I think of congregations, I don't know the answer for the ones that are going to fit us today. And so to your point, there was oppression. There was all sorts of things that existed inside of the old. And so it was a different way of being. And you're making me think about like in coaching and in leadership and training in this work, we talk about meta-view. And meta-view is like the simple idea that when you're so stuck in like me, this problem is so big, this challenge is so big that if you were to just imagine being able to look at yourself from however far above, or look at everyone in the world and in your life from far above, what would you see? And it obviously changes your perspective. If you were to look at us like as a larger society, and as we're talking about this idea of, the challenges we're having, the ways in which we wake ourselves up, and the point that we're at today, like what does the meta view tell you right now?
The meta view tells me something that's actually quite invisible to me in everyday life, which is I'm part of an enormous web of experience and knowing. And to only focus on my node of that web is to see such a tiny bit of the picture. And it seems to me that that is a source of great pain for us, like only dwelling in that one node. And yet, as you say, we've walked very wisely away from a lot of old webs. And when a spider weaves a web, it degrades over time, and those webs have degraded. But we need to find a way to weave a better web. And there are some skills that we might have grown up with, or that our parents might have had, that we can draw back on. And there are some new things that need to be made. And for me, because I'm this wildly optimistic little soul and I can't stop myself, like I find that really exciting. I find that really, really exciting, because I grew up, like I'm a child of the 90s and 80s. And I grew up having this really clear sense of what wasn't going right in my society. And also this sense that it was getting better. And that has now almost reversed. Actually, I don't feel like things are getting better. I don't feel that same sense that the world is automatically rolling towards more justice. But equally, I don't feel like I know so clearly what those answers are in the way that I feel like I used to. And that, to me, opens up this whole tranche of work that we can do together. And actually, like the invention of the internet, this amazing new technology and social media that's come with it, shouldn't be seen as necessarily a bad thing. It's just a really nascent technology, and we haven't figured out how to use it properly yet. And we've been involved in all of these grand social experiments with it that we're now beginning to see the problems with. But let's not walk away from that, because I think that technology is there, and we're going to see this new generation of really exciting. They're so justice oriented. They're so passionate. They're so funny. Like, you've only got to spend a bit of time on TikTok and you feel wildly optimistic about young people. I think they're going to take this technology that my generation made and the generation before me, and they're going to figure out better things to do with it. And I feel great faith in that.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Gen Z, and I have to imagine, I think it's now Gen Alpha because we hit Gen Z.
My son keeps telling me he's Gen Alpha, yeah.
He's Gen Alpha, yeah. I'm like, how could they not want to change the world? As a millennial, I don't think we're quite as justice-oriented or as movement-oriented. I think we're more like success-oriented. I don't know, it's a different way of being. So I agree. I look at them and go, oh my God, that's amazing. And like, I feel some of that, but God, I wish I had more of it.
But they're so like native in the sites of change that we're all arguing about. The answers to those are really obvious to Gen Z. The language of gender, for example, is completely unproblematic to them. They have no problem with accepting gay people, for just to sort of draw a big example. Like, none of it even bothers them. It's just basic and obvious to them.
Right. It was a topic of conversation. I talk a lot about this with people in my life of like, what types of things have we said are political that are not political? They're just simply human rights conversations that have been politicized. That's a different thing than it being a political conversation. So yeah, it is really interesting. And also, you're right, it's hopeful.
It's really hopeful. You can watch change happen in that way. And I remember, like, it makes me think back to being at primary school and our teacher setting up a debate one day that was like, is racism wrong? And I know.
And it's like, right. But at the point was an okay conversation.
Absolutely. So to her generation, like that was up for debate. Whereas I remember, at that age, like I was 10 years old thinking, this is not up for discussion. There's no debate here. And I now see my son thinking the same things about these things that are supposedly up for debate, but which are just obviously wrong-headed. And I think that's how it gets fixed. We're all busy shouting at each other over it. That's not what's going to solve it. It's going to be that next generation rolling through, making money, voting, taking up positions of power. And it's just going to be like the air they breathe for them.
Well, yeah, it's like, things often have to break down to get built back up. When I think of the meta view of where we are, it's like we're in the breakdown. We're in the breakdown.
Yeah.
And I hope to God, that then, of course, things don't just break down and sit there. It's not human nature. It's like you break down and then you find a way to create something else. You weave a new web. I really resonate right now with this, like, the time and community, the thought about how do we hold the like sacredness of congregation and being with each other, and how do we hold that with the need to also care about each other, to congregate, to be with each other.
I interviewed Lama Rod Owens for my podcast. He's a Buddhist teacher, and he was talking about the idea of apocalypse and how we keep threatening each other with the apocalypse. Like, if we get it wrong, there'll be an apocalypse. And he's like, no. This is the apocalypse. This is how the apocalypse feels. We are in that space. And actually, the truth about apocalypse is that it's deeply painful and people get badly hurt. And also it brings about necessary change. And it brings about a reordering of justice. And I found that thought like deeply painful and terrifying, but also deeply probably true. Like it really hit me, that one. And to see ourselves in the mess rather than trying to avoid the mess. Like, we have not avoided the mess. The mess is here. And there's energy that comes from that. Sorry, I've taken this conversation in a really dark direction. I'm so sorry. I can't stop myself.
No, I think you are meeting like the zeitgeist. It's like I've been talking to people who are like, oh, I think I'm supposed to be feeling this way. It's, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summer. We're out of lockdown. It's 2023. We think we're far away. And yet I think we're all still grappling with what all of this is and like how we find ourselves post this experience. And that's why you wrote this book, right? Is like to give us all like At least some guidance. One thing to put in our toolkit.
I did. And I called
you
it a
sure
really
did. And then you're like, and
pretty
now
name just to draw people
I'm
in.
going to light you on fire. Yeah.
Like now, right, here we go. There we go.
So tell me, Katherine, what I want to ask you, I actually want you to tell me what these words mean to you that you've used. What does it mean to awaken?
It's a slow process, and it's a process of your senses coming back online. It doesn't happen all at once. It's an action. It's a cycle. It's not a momentary thing. I love practices rather than one-off steps. And so for me, awakening is inviting that slow process of coming back to our senses again.
Well, and you say coming back, which means like awakening which I love, because I think of like spiritual practices where it's like you've always been there, but so much has covered you up that you have to invite or find a way to practice coming back to what was always there.
It's peeling off layers. It's getting back to our direct sensing of something that's actually divine. Like if I can use a big word like that, because for me, that giant connected human community is divine. And that really direct experience of humanity is divine. But it gets covered in like dust and bits of debris from everything that's happened to us. But if we can peel that back, we come in contact with something that feels hot and fast and urgent and true. That's what that means to me.
And how would you describe awe?
It is the experience of feeling tiny in a vast universe. Like not thinking about it rationally and intellectually, but knowing it in your bones. And it comes to you directly in a moment. And it's a wonderful resituation of human experience.
And finally, what is enchantment?
Well, it is not, unfortunately, talking to unicorns or believing in fairies. I'm going to do it backwards. I'm going to say it's the opposite of disenchantment, which is a space we feel very comfortable in. And that implies there was an enchantment in the first place if we've become disenchanted. And so enchantment is this feeling of connection with all the world around us that comforts and restores us, but also gives us a radical understanding of what we actually are and opens up the space to explore that.
So it's a verb or a way of living.
Yeah,
it feels
verby. I like that. It feels verby. Yeah. It's a noun and a verb at the same time, isn't it? I think for me, like it's that everything kind of a word. And I love that it's got that association with magic and with spell casting, actually, and with singing. Like the chant and enchantment is linked to the idea of song, which I think is just such a beautiful way of connecting with that feeling, actually, that feeling of generating and drawing in at the same time, that breathing in and out, that exchange.
Yeah. You reminded me of, I was probably 3 months ago, I was walking, I live in a new neighborhood, and I was walking my dogs, and it was a Sunday morning and the sun was out, and it wasn't summer yet. So it was like, I don't know, brisk, but I heard this noise. I was walking past, it's like this row of homes on, one of the regular streets in New York City. And I was like, what is that? And it was coming out of an apartment building, but I think it was actually a townhome. And the door opened as I was walking the dogs and they were sniffing, and it was singing. And I was like, I can't believe I didn't recognize, like I knew they were singing, but it was like the moment that you realize, I was like, oh, this is a congregation of people who've come together on this Sunday morning. And in that moment, I was like, oh, this is a part of life that I felt at the time. I was like, oh, I'm missing this. Like, this is a part of life that I would actually love to have back. I love that like our conversation is about knowing things have existed before, maybe somewhere deep down, and then kind of coming back to those things, because that's things like singing, which is so simple, but a group of people together singing can be so darn powerful that you're like, I cried. I was like, oh my God, I want to go in there. I can't.
That's
they don't know me. But I'm like the crazy lady with dogs. It's like, but it was that sense that like, I want that. And I think a lot of us want whatever our version of that is, where we feel this sense of being, grounded and hopeful in the possibility of feeling enchantment again.
That's just such a gorgeous image. And I feel that too. I was always a chorister, And I gave it up because the commitment was hard and everything about it was hard. And I now think about how it felt to merge your voices with other people's voices and to truly be singing, like not singing like when you have to sing at school and you're trying to mumble into your hymn book as much as possible or whatever, but to really sing with other people and to feel that sense of intertwining and deep unspoken cooperation and respect. It's beautiful. Like, how do we make that again without the bits that we quite rightly didn't want?
Katherine, I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements. I assume they had to have changed since we last spoke. Better humans are
interconnected.
Better work is
human.
And a better world has
a multiplicity of people who love each other.
I love that.
That's a very lovely, it's a small world after all statement, but I'm going with it. That's fine.
We're going with it. I'm falling deep into idealism because I think I hope it's closer to realism than we think, you know?
Yeah, somewhere those 2 lines intersect. Surely we've got to find it.
Correct. Katherine, thank you so much. I obviously always want you back.
Take me anytime. I love
wait.
it. I love talking to you. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you. I could talk to you forever.
I know. Let's do it again.
That was author Katherine May. Check out her books, Wintering and Enchantment. One big thing before we go. What struck me most about our conversation was what we gain by being in intentional community or in congregation with each other. Having people around us that we can connect to, that we can relate to, that we can support, that can make us understand that we are but a drop in the ocean. As you probably heard from both of us and have felt yourself, we are much better together than we are on our own. And though we may not have the answers yet about what specific communities look like, how we rebuild these, how we reconnect to each other, it's a really meaningful question to ponder. How do we reincorporate supportive community for the betterment of ourselves and each other? If this conversation has you thinking about rediscovering enchantment, sure has me thinking about that, share it with someone you care about and help other people like you find our show by leaving us a rating before you go. Even better, write a 1-sentence review telling me what you loved about this episode. As always, you can find me on LinkedIn writing about human potential and meaningful living. Subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.linkedin.com/ITA. That's www.linkedin.com/ITA. In the Arena is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Alexis Ramdow and Rafa Fariha. Asaf Gadron makes sure we sound good in the studio. Joe DeGiorgi mixed our show. Enrique Montalvo is the executive producer of LinkedIn Editorial Productions. Dave Pond is head of news production. Courtney Coop is head of LinkedIn Original Audio and Video. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.